You ever have one of those days? I just got done filming what was supposed to be the video you're watching now, but when I went to edit it, I realized I forgot to plug the mic in. Here we go again. These are the 10 commandments of Jiu Jitsu over 40. Commandment number 1, train with intention. What do I mean by that? You should always go to class with something you're actively trying to improve upon. Don't just go to class, drill some technique, get some rolls in, and leave class and not think about jiu-jitsu till next time. I mean, that's okay if you're just a hobbyist, you just want to go get a workout in. But here's the thing. As an older athlete, what you need are technical solutions. You're not going to be successful based on power, speed, explosiveness, based on your age. Those things aren't going to help you as much when you're older. You need technical solutions. You need solid strategies. You need good timing. You need to develop an understanding of all the options available from any given position. You need to develop transitional sequences. You need to develop a complete game so that you can be technically better than the opponents that you go against. And that's what's going to give you success as an older athlete. Well, that's a lot to learn. And the way that you accelerate that is by always having something that you're working on when you go to class. What should you be working on? Well, that's going to be informed by the things you're struggling with. Maybe you're getting your guard passed too much. Maybe you're struggling to get out from side control. Maybe there's a submission you like, but your finishing rate is very low. There are always things to work on in jiu-jitsu. So I recommend that you always leave the class, do an assessment of, okay, where did I fail tonight? Where was I successful tonight? What do I need to improve tonight? Maybe you go home, you do a little research, maybe you watch a little YouTube, maybe you consult with some of your training partners, maybe you consult with your coach, and you develop a strategy so that next time you show up to train, you have something active that you're trying to work on. That's going to pay huge dividends because ultimately jiu-jitsu is a self-directed activity. Yes, of course, you have a coach and they're teaching you techniques, but ultimately the way we assemble a game, the way we implement a way of playing jiu-jitsu that's uniquely ours is a self-directed activity. And the more that you can take control of that and responsibility for that learning, the faster and better you're going to get. Commandment number 2, manage your expectations. I have done at least 2 videos on this subject, so I won't rehash it all, but the idea is that as a foundational principle, if we lower our expectations, we will tend to be happier in life. And in the other videos, I've given a bunch of examples. What I mean by that, for example, let's say you go to a restaurant for dinner and you get poor service. You expected great service, and therefore you get upset. Or you're driving down the freeway and somebody cuts you off. You expected that the people around you would follow the rules of the road. That person didn't, and you got upset. Or maybe it's your birthday and your family forgot. You expected that they would remember your birthday. When they didn't, you got upset. So in all those examples, you had an expectation. When that expectation wasn't met, you had an emotional response. In jiu-jitsu, it's very common to have those emotional fluctuations because every day you train is different. Let's say you have a great night of training, you do really well, you get some taps, you made what it feels like a breakthrough in your game. Now you're riding high. You go home and you're on top of the world and, oh man, I'm getting this. Jiu-jitsu's great, I'm getting good at it. Then you come back the next night expecting a similar result and you don't get it. Instead, you have a terrible night. Maybe you got tapped a lot. That breakthrough that you thought you made, it wasn't there the next night, and now you feel terrible about your game. The truth is, every night is different. Every training session is going to be different, so you need to find the middle path where you don't get too high when you do well, you don't get too low when you don't do well. You don't want to ride the roller coaster of emotion. Jiu-jitsu is hard enough without those fluctuations of emotion. Show up to train because it's fun, show up to train to hang out with your friends, show up to train because you're improving, show up to train because you're getting fitter. Don't show up and have these, big emotional swings. They will just make jiu-jitsu harder. Commandment number 3, understand your limits and stay within them. This can be hard because jiu-jitsu is very competitive. We wear colored belts, which signify rank, and there's an expectation of performance there. We show up to train as a new white belt. We're at the bottom of the pecking order, but over time, our place in the pecking order increases. We don't want to lose our place in the hierarchy. We want to improve our position in the hierarchy. And so there's a built-in competitive motivator there. At some academies, they are very competitive. The mindset is very competitive. The coach preaches leaving it all on the mat. You got to train hard. You don't take rounds off, and you just got to go hard. The problem when you're older is that if you exceed your limits, recovery is going to be a real problem for you. You're not going to be able to train as frequently. You're going to be feeling beat up a lot. Jiu-jitsu is not going to be as fun when you're constantly sore, constantly beat up. You've got those aches and pains that never seem to go away. The way to deal with that is stay within your limits. This takes a little bit of experience. It takes a little bit of experimentation on your part to figure out, okay, how many rounds can I roll realistically on any given night and recover adequately so I'm not walking around super sore the next day? How many days a week can I train and recover adequately? You have to find a formula that works for you. And that formulation changes over time. It can change depending on your diet, depending on how, whether you're doing some exercising in your own time, some fitness stuff. This is not a static formulation. You're constantly having to calibrate how often and how intensely you train in order to be able to do it at a frequency that's going to let you get good at jiu-jitsu reasonably fast. I did a video called The Triangle of Energy, where I talk about a concept that is very important when we train jiu-jitsu. Go check that video out. And I think it'll help you get a perspective on how to calibrate whether you're staying within your limits so that you can train more effectively as an older athlete. Commandment 4, focus on mobility and flexibility at least as much as you're focusing on strength, maybe more. When you get older, what are the things that leave us? Well, certainly our mobility declines, our flexibility declines, our joint integrity declines, you get stiffer, you get less mobile. Your strength doesn't decline nearly as much when you get older. It's normal for an older athlete to be able to retain a fair amount of strength. But what leaves you is the ability to move well. Jiu-jitsu, at its most fundamental level, is simply a movement art. The quality of your jiu-jitsu will always be directly proportional to the quality of your movement. If you have excellent movement, you've given yourself a shot at developing excellent jiu-jitsu. If you have poor movement, poor mobility, you are never going to have beautiful jiu-jitsu. There's going to be a limitation there. So I'm a big believer in focusing on mobility because we need to be able to move ourselves. Jiu-jitsu is fundamentally about moving yourself. It's not really about moving your opponent, stopping your opponent, blocking your opponent. Of course, we do some of those things, but fundamentally it's about moving yourself. So the more efficient you can become at moving yourself in 3 dimensions, the better off you'll be because you'll be more dynamic. You'll be able to move better, transition better, seize windows of opportunity better. And so that takes some work as we get older to maintain that movement potential, but it will pay dividends. The best jiu-jitsu practitioners that I know that are older, they tend to be people that have a high degree of mobility. They tend to keep their weight under control, so their strength to weight ratio is pretty good. You don't have to be super strong in an absolute sense, but if you're strong enough to move yourself efficiently, then that's all you really need. That and great mobility, some flexibility, that's going to give you some resilience so you can train better. Those things will pay dividends. As an older athlete, we need every advantage we can get, and focusing on mobility is going to help you a lot. Number 5, hydrate properly. Hydration, in my opinion, is not something that should primarily happen while you're training. Hydration is something that should happen in the hours leading up to training. If you show up to train fully hydrated, even if you don't drink while you're training, you're probably going to be fine. If you show up to train dehydrated, because during training you're sweating and you're being further depleted, you're not going to be able to drink enough to rehydrate yourself while you're training. I learned this the hard way. I ended up getting heat stroke, or I don't know if it was full on heat stroke. It was close to heat stroke one time. I was in a very hot, kind of severe training environment, and I was messed up. I went to the side of the mat. I was passing out. It felt like I was going to pass out while I was driving home. I had a massive blood pressure drop. For hours, I was just pouring sweat, even long after I had cooled down, which was kind of scary. And I realized in that moment, man, I need to take my hydration seriously, because older athletes, we are more susceptible to heat. Very hot, severe environments will affect us more than they would if we were young. So we need to hydrate properly. But here's the thing, it's not just about drinking lots and lots of water. In fact, there's a medical condition where you can actually dehydrate yourself further if you drink water excessively. Because you drink so much water, it depletes your electrolytes, and now you've made yourself more dehydrated. So don't just drink tons and tons of water. I recommend that you do some electrolyte supplementation. I had a strength and conditioning coach turned me onto this years ago, and it's been a game changer for me. I used to get leg cramps at night while I slept. I used to get cramps sometimes while I trained Jiu Jitsu, even though I thought I was plenty hydrated. But when I started doing electrolyte supplementation, all that stuff went away, and I felt better when I trained, and I felt better after I trained. I was able to recover better. So the way I do it is I get electrolytes first thing in the morning, because we've slept all night, we haven't drank all night, we're dehydrated in the mornings. I'll fill a big glass of water, put some electrolytes in it. I use a product called Element. Element is a sponsor of this channel. If you go in the description below, you'll see there's a link where you can get a free box of Element to try it out. So I will get my electrolytes first thing in the morning, and then after training, not every time I train, but if it's been really hot, if I've gotten real depleted from that training session, I will definitely hit some electrolytes when I get done training. And it has been, as I said, a game changer. I recommend, as an older athlete, you look into it. We need to take every precaution. We need every advantage we can get when we're a little bit older training, and hydration is something that is critically important. Number 6, warm up thoroughly. If you're an older athlete, I guarantee you have issues with your body. For me, it's my low back, it's my shoulders. I've got a permanently torn labrum on one side. I've had a rotator cuff repair on the other side. I've got a bulging disc in my neck that gives me problems now and again. So you need to warm up in a way that targets the areas in your body that need that extra attention. If all you do is jump into the warm-up that your instructor leads you through at the beginning of class, well, that may or may not be suitable to what you need. And in fact, sometimes those warm-ups can be pretty high intensity. If you just jump into it cold, not only is there some risk of injury, but you're going to be sore the next day. The times when I am the most sore, the times when I don't recover as well, are the times when I went to train and I didn't warm up. Instead, I just jumped in hard and fast right out of the gate. So I'm a big believer in warming up. I'm also a believer in warming up when it's time to roll. I warm up before class, you drill some technique, now it's time to roll. I will grab somebody who I think is going to be able to give me a nice technical roll. My first round I consider kind of a throwaway roll. I tend to try to pick someone who's going to give me a good quality of roll so I can just begin moving, I can begin breaking a sweat, I can begin getting my heart rate up, so that then by the time it's time for the second roll, third roll, now I'm really warmed up and ready to train hard. I'm also an advocate of cooling off when you get done training, spending a few minutes stretching, getting your body kind of put back together after it's been contorted into a pretzel during training. There's an arc to training. You show up, you warm up, you peak, and then you cool off. And that's the way to train more safely, and it's a way to go home and not be as sore the next day. Number 7, learn to breathe. And this might sound silly because we've been breathing our whole life. We've been breathing since we came out of the womb. We breathe in our sleep. Our parasympathetic system lets us breathe autonomously without even thinking about it. But here's the thing. There's a difference between enough oxygen to minimally support life and enough oxygen to maximally support an athletic performance. You need to maximize your oxygen because you will never be able to optimize your performance if you're breathing poorly. And it's a skill. Breathing is a skill. I was a terrible breather as a white belt. I was a terrible breather as a blue belt. As a purple belt, I started working on it, and it's taken me many years to actually get pretty good at breathing, and I'm still working on it. So we have lungs. There's an upper portion to our lungs. There's a lower portion to the lungs. There are some lobes down here. If when you breathe, the only thing that's happening is your chest is going up and down, well, you're not filling the entirety of your lungs. You need to fill all the way to the bottom. And the way you do that is using something called diaphragmatic breathing. Some people call it belly breathing, which you breathe in and it should look like you have a belly. It should push your belly out because you're displacing that space with your lungs, so your belly has to stick out. I advocate breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. Breathing out through your mouth lets you expel air more quickly. Breathing in through your nose lets your body utilize oxygen better than breathing through your mouth. Along with that, my rule is generally that I try to stay within a pace where I can breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth. If I've got my mouth hanging open and I'm gasping for air, I'm pushing way too hard. Now, obviously in Jiu Jitsu, sometimes we have to redline ourselves. Sometimes we have to get that guard pass. Sometimes we have to transition. Sometimes we have to, employ an explosive movement to reverse a position. But when I do that, I will always try to then dial it back, get to the new position, rest a little bit, get into my breath, get my heart rate down, and then continue looking for new opportunities. So practice your breath. What really helped me internalize the idea of breathing properly was when I would bump fists, and in my mind I'm thinking, I'm just going to focus on my breath while we roll. I'm not going to even think about what's happening with this opponent. My body should know what to do. I've trained my body to respond properly. I'm going to simply meditate and focus on my breath. So we'll bump fists, and I begin. Nice deep breaths, filling the entire cavity, getting as much oxygen as possible. We need every advantage, especially as an older athlete. Learn to breathe. It'll help you achieve maximal athletic performance. Number 8, be selective about who you roll with. If you don't advocate for your own safety, nobody else will. If you don't protect your own body, nobody else will. As an older athlete, safety first. Safety trumps everything. Regardless of anything else going on in the dojo in that moment, you should be thinking safety first. So if you're not comfortable rolling with somebody for whatever reason, maybe they outweigh you by 80 pounds, maybe they're much younger than you and they like to go really hard, maybe they're kind of a knucklehead, whatever reason, if you're not comfortable with rolling with someone, they walk over to you, hey, you want to roll? No, I'm good. That's all you have to say. They'll move on. Nobody really cares. I recommend this, especially for older athletes, and especially if you are on the newer side of Jiu Jitsu. You're a white belt, you're a blue belt, because dealing with a huge disparity of size, strength, and age requires a lot of technical skill. And as a white belt, you haven't really developed that skill yet. As a blue belt, you don't really have that skill yet. It's better to wait until a little later in your journey till you can say, okay, I can deal with this guy now. I have the strategy and I've got enough experience that I can roll, and I think I can be okay with that person. So learn to say no. Advocate for yourself. It's your body. Protect yourself. Safety first. Commandment number 9, tap early. And I feel silly even bringing this up because, of course, we've all heard the mantra, tap early, tap often. It's the first thing someone tells you when you say, hey, I think I'm going to try Jiu Jitsu. What should I know? You should know to tap early, tap often. But the truth is, most of us don't tap early enough. I have broken that rule a million times in my Jiu Jitsu journey, and I have suffered consequences to that. I have a bulging disc in my neck, kind of a spot in my neck that flares up now and again, and I remember the moment where that became a problem. I was getting choked real aggressively. I tried gutting it out. Eventually I tapped, but it was too late. Don't do that. There's no reason for that. These days, if someone grabs my neck, if they even set up the choke even halfway okay, I'll tap. And sometimes it surprises my training partners. They'll say, wait, was that even on yet? And I'll say, yeah, you had it set up, you just hadn't cinched it completely yet, but I guarantee you could have gotten it, eventually. And so it's fine to tap. Nobody pays attention to how many times you tap. Nobody pays attention to how many times you got tapped. Be perfectly willing to tap and live to train and fight another day. You're a hobbyist at Jiu Jitsu, most likely. You're not a professional. You're not an MMA fighter. You're not someone that, has a financial incentive to not tap. You need to tap. You need to protect yourself and tap often. Throw away your ego. It really doesn't matter. Commandment number 10, prioritize recovery. I consider recovery to be a series of techniques. Jiu-Jitsu has techniques. Well, recovery is a technique or a series of techniques. A lot of people will go train Jiu-Jitsu, they get done training, they go home, take a shower, maybe eat something, sit on the couch and watch a little TV, then they go to bed, they sleep all night, the next morning they get up, drink a little coffee, get into the car and drive to work, and then sit at work for the next 8 hours. What have you done to help your recovery from the moment you left the dojo to the almost 24 hours the next day? You've done nothing, really. So a much better strategy, especially with us older athletes, is to be proactive about your recovery. And what does that mean? Well, you get home from training. If you have a hot tub, maybe you jump in the hot tub and you loosen up your muscles. Maybe you're very careful about what you eat post-training. You get some protein in, you get some good carbs in, you get yourself, fully tanked up, fully hydrated, you get your electrolytes going. Maybe the next morning after you sleep, you do a little yoga, a little mobility in the morning to get those joints going, to get those muscles to release the toxins and get that, those stiff joints moving again. You go to work, maybe every hour you take a break, you walk outside, you do some squats, you do a little stretching. And so you're actively working on your recovery in the time in between training sessions. And this will help you a lot. I'm a huge fan of active recovery, which is that even on days where you don't need to work out because you worked out yesterday, you do a workout, and it's not really a workout, it's just you're moving your body in order to get that, that muscle movement and get yourself recovered. I go on walks almost every day. I live in a hilly environment. I can go on a 2 or 3 mile walk really easily. There's a park that's about a mile and a half from my house. And so I've become a fan of, on days, especially when I'm recovering, I will go for a walk, go to the park, do some stretching in the park, maybe hang on the pull-up bar, right? Active recovery. It's definitely going to help you. I've mentioned this a few times that you need to take every advantage that you need. When you're young, you don't need to recover because it doesn't matter. When you're older, you need to help yourself recover. Life will be way more fun when you're not walking around incredibly sore all the time. So those are my 10 commandments when you're over 40. If you like content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you haven't done so, head on over to rickellis.com. I've got some instructional courses available over there. Or go to artofskillgear.com where I've got some nice swag related to the channel. And I appreciate your support. Take care.